Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been looking for. When the Prime Minister returned from the annual CARICOM Heads of Government meeting recently, he came bearing news of a regional movement towards legalizing medical marijuana. It's a classic case of better late, as many other countries in the developed world have long since addressed and legalized the use of marijuana for medical reasons, and they are enjoying some economic benefit as well. It's meant that the issue is again at the vortex of a local debate of whether to do the same here. The plant's medicinal properties are touted to treat seizures, headaches, nausea, Crohn's disease, muscle spasms, and a whole lot more. Tonight, we're going to look at legalizing it or not. Our guests are Bishop Simeon Hall, a member of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana, Elliot Hepburn Marshall, CEO of Proffer RX Collective, and Dr. Marvin Smith, Deputy Director of PHA. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
Cleanse your colon and neutralize acid in the blood. With our high pH levels, it's perfect for those with health issues, and it's affordable too. Drink your way to better health with Crystal Clear H2O. Live it, love it, drink it.
Welcome back to On the Record. The Prime Minister says he's not going to let his opinion sway the public debate, even as political and religious leaders line up publicly in support. Should we legalize medical marijuana or not? Well, we begin with a look at where we are in this debate.
I mean, herbs are good for everything. Why these people who want to do so much good for everyone, who call themselves governments and this and that, why them say you must not use the herb? You see? And we check that and we can't find, we just see them just say, no, you mustn't use it because it make you rebel. Against what?
When the late Bob Marley spoke openly to his use of marijuana and called for widespread acceptance and legalization, his followers revered him, but many more reviled his lyrics and the almost euphoria-like state he portrayed. More than 3 decades later, the use of marijuana has become as socially acceptable as alcohol in some circles. And while full legalization for recreation may yet be a ways off, the proven medical properties of marijuana have given rise to a different kind of discussion, one that our North American and European neighbors have had a long time ago. The latest round of public debate comes after a CARICOM Commission on Marijuana suggests it be reclassified as a controlled substance and not a dangerous drug. And there's more. retroactively fixing past injustices of those convicted and even expunging the criminal records born out of these dangerous drug arrests. But probably most telling of all has been the roll call of religious and political leaders publicly lending support to the legalization of medical marijuana.
I now support the use of marijuana for medical purposes, primarily for medical purposes. But my first suggestion would be for the government to lead in a national discussion, pros and cons, to hear divergent views.
And the list of supporters includes former Governor General Sir Arthur Folkes and former Prime Minister Perry Christie. For medical reasons, yes, but not everyone supports the decriminalization. Bahamas Faith Ministries Pastor Dave Burrows would prefer a possession charge come with penalties.
The penalties today may be too severe. So, for example, I remember when I was growing up, there are people who went to jail for 9 months for a half bag of weed or a joint. I think that's too harsh, and so what I favor is some type of penalty, like a misdemeanor penalty, like a traffic ticket, something like that, where you pay a fine, but you don't have a criminal record for life and so on.
And here's where government may have the toughest decision to make, with a recent survey showing 71% in favor of legalizing it for medical use. The stigma attached and the heavy penalties have crippled an untold amount of young offenders.
People can smoke anyhow. You can't legislate what people can do, whether it's legal or it's illegal. You can't legislate that. You can't even legislate righteousness. You can't make people, they have to decide it's not something they want to do.
We got to tread carefully as we decriminalize. I'm a proponent for decriminalization for small usage, persons who are found with a gram or less than an ounce.
The Prime Minister says he won't allow his personal views to influence the public debate, but will convene a commission to gauge public sentiment over the next few months.
I want to get high, so high. I want to get high, so high. One draw, one draw. One draw.
We have now set the stage for a very interesting discussion tonight, one that, quite frankly, I never thought that I would see happen in my lifetime. Welcome to my guest, Bishop Simeon Hall, a member of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana, Elliot Hepburn Marshall, CEO of Proper RX Collective, and Dr. Marvin Smith, President of the Caribbean Association of Pharmacists. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record. I'm very happy to have you here tonight. As I said, and as I tried to lay out in that setup piece, this is the discussion that I have seen make a 180 in my lifetime. The last time I was in the studio and we talked about it, I recounted when Bob Marley came to the Bahamas and the concert that he had at the Queen Elizabeth Sports Center at the time, and what that did, and the national discussion that came out as a result of that. But I wanted to start, first of all, by sort of laying the groundwork for each of you and what you will bring to this discussion. Bishop, I'll start with you. This CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana, how did this come about? Why now? And to me, why so late, it would seem, in this discussion?
2 years ago, I was asked to serve on the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana. I understand that it was birthed out of the CARICOM position, and mostly from its citizens who were pushing for redefinition of the cannabis herb. And the heads got it, and they began to put together some, back in 2014, I think it is, they put together a commission. Money stopped it from going forward, and then in 2016, it went forward. I was asked by the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Fred Mitchell, And I didn't know much about this plant. When Bob Marley came to town back in the 70s, I single-handedly protested because I thought...
I didn't think you single-handedly. I think there were many others who protested.
Yeah,
I know, but I understand.
I remember leading the fight. I don't remember too many in the back of me because we like victory, but we don't like protest. But I remember saying that this is not a good example for us to have someone smoking in front of our young people, and it was contradictory. It was the year of the children that brought him to town. Well, I now have a deeper appreciation for Mr. Marley since I now know his lyrics of his songs, that some of them, particularly the one where he protested against Babylon, and we need to protest against Babylon. That's how I feel now. So information causes you to have a mental metamorphosis. I now have, it is now my conclusion that there is some medicinal value in the cannabis herb. And I believe it could help our people.
I definitely want to explore that a little more later on in the show and how you and others have come to this place, this metamorphosis that you described. Dr. Marvin Smith, president of the Caribbean Association of Pharmacists. What is the association's stake in this discussion right now?
Well, thanks for having us here. I represent pharmacists and pharmacy partners of about 40 different countries and states across the region. And the thing that drives us is we are lovers of science. And so where you see this metamorphosis that you talked about from the citizenry come about and start pushing the limits of what we've been previously taught and previously believed. And when we started looking at the science of it, we started to see definitively that there are benefits from cannabis to healthcare, whether it's in long-term treatment or short-term acute conditions. And so from our end, we really wanted to take the bull by the horns. We are scientists first, we're clinicians also, but we're also parents and children and caregivers. And you know, from our end, I've heard too many stories of people who say, you know, my mother, my kid, my husband, my sister took this drug and got worse. We want to make sure that we're always at the cutting edge. And if marijuana can provide that, we want to do that. So our position is that we believe in research. Essentially, we believe that marijuana should be given the same opportunity to prove itself as a therapy that all other medications have. We also want to make sure that the education for both clinicians and patients are there, so that when we as healthcare providers engage our clients, our customers, our patients, that want to or are utilizing marijuana as a health option, that we can provide them the best information out there.
Elliot Hepburn, Marshall, CEO of Proper RX Collective. First of all, explain to us what that is, and I know that you are a part of another organization and a movement as such, and tell us really what is your role in this as well.
Proper RX Collective is my company that I started back in 2008, 2007 actually, and the whole motivation behind that was to actually treat the sick people, get medicine directly to them. That was the catalyst for getting me here as well, into this space here. A lot of attention was paid to the story that came out with my partnership with the Morgan Heritage family, and my phone began to ring, and I got countless calls and continue to get countless calls from home for sick people who need help.
And you, just so that we clarify, you're not based here?
I'm not. I just bring my fight here every month. Take time away from my business and come here and fight for this for the Bahamian people. You treat Bahamians?
No, you help to treat Bahamians?
No, unless they come to see me.
They come to see, but do Bahamians come to see you?
We have some that came.
Interesting.
Yes.
So, you should bring up, you started your company back in 2007, around that time. We're now at 2018. We're talking now 10 years later, when the rest of the world seemingly would have had this discussion and come to some conclusions and made some things happen. We are just now coming to the table to even have this discussion. And my question, gentlemen, is why are we just now beginning to have this discussion when, you know, other parts of the world, in developed countries, even third world countries, they are so much further along in this whole issue?
Well, it started back in 1996, actually. That was the beginning of it. That's when California first legalized medical marijuana in 1996. And that movement pushed across the country. Now we have, you know, over 30 states that are involved in some type of medical program or recreational program. And then you look to the north, Canada's been open for some time. As you look through South and Central America, more countries are coming online rapidly. It's, like I said in many interviews, it's a closed conversation in the first world, but this is a discussion that needs debate in the third world. But during that debate, we have a Thursday paper that consists of so much bodies. We need to be treating those people now.
Yeah. Bishop.
You know, passivity is not always a virtue. The church has always, most times, been the tail light of progress rather than the headlight. I believe it should. You know, a year ago, people were calling me Reverend Clico. Now they call me the Reverend Who's for Marijuana. Both are misnomers. What I try to do is contextualize the gospel of Jesus Christ into social action. I believe you should pull it out of heaven and bring it down to where you live. So when I saw and begin to study this thing, I said, people can be helped. If we can help people to avoid making the Thursday paper, if we can, you know, how could we, people are dying because they cannot get proper medical care. And, you know, I'm turned off by insurances, for instance. When you're 75, they cancel your insurance. Isn't that when you need it most? All I'm saying is that as a preacher, if this thing will help, and as the brother said, can we have a national discussion, an intelligent conversation? I went to 9 different island nations in the Caribbean, and we had open discussions with blacks and whites, Rastafarians and Christians, Indians, and a heterogeneous community, and no one called your Ma Picky Head or your PLP.
And we seem to denigrate into name calling and foolishness rather the minute that there is a national conversation that you may disagree with.
That's my point, and that's all my interest is. All of my primary interest, I believe that marijuana herb has medicinal value. I also want to say that we should have a national conversation, all sides, and bring it to the
Well,
floor.
hopefully this starts at, I know, you wanted to say something just before we go.
It's funny because I'm a member of the Rotary Club of West Nassau, and I gave a talk at my club, and it was published in the paper. And promptly the next day, and I'm a 5th generation Seventh-day Adventist, okay? Promptly the next day, a lady showed up at the PMH pharmacy and demanded to see me, and fussed me out in front of the lobby, in front of everybody, told me I was a bad Seventh-day Adventist because I tell the people to go smoke weed.
How dare you?
See, but the thing is, the thing that stops this discussion, that slows it down, particularly in the Bahamas, and throughout the region, we've seen it pick up a little bit in some other places, and drag in some other places, is our love of traditionalism, our acceptance of mysticism over science, all right? We see them as incompatible, all right? So we have this attitude that I was told this, and because I was told this 50 years ago, it's true.
This is what it has to be.
And no matter what else I hear, it is. And so we have to get past that. The other problem, in the big elephant in the room, is money.
Of course.
Because you're dealing with a treatment that essentially you could grow yourself.
So some pharmaceutical companies.
I didn't say pharmaceutical companies.
Maybe cut out.
It may not even be the pharmaceutical
May not even be that.
Insurance.
Well, I'm sure many other stakeholders, I'm sure. Gentlemen, we have to take a quick break. We will be right back. Should we legalize medical marijuana or not? That's our discussion tonight. On the Record continues right after this.
Fine Threads is the place to shop for all your men's clothing. From casual to formal wear, we've got you covered. Choose from brand names like Jordan Craig, PJ Mark, John Adam, and more. Looking good was never more affordable. Drop by one of our 4 convenient locations in Nassau, or check out our online store at FineThreads.com, where shopping is made even easier. Fine Threads, for the man with good taste.
It's a wealth of entertainment with a touch of class and sophistication. A journey of the senses with an unparalleled sense of style. Discover hidden adventures that are cradled in the palms of paradise. Traverse the annals of human history and explore the farthest reaches of exclusivity. It's an excursion that few can afford, but all should experience. And it's only on AWE.
We are at a very pivotal time in the development of this country. A substance once demonized and seen only as strictly criminal, and consumption could be legalized for medical purposes. Dr. Marvin Smith, Elliot Hepburn Marshall, and Bishop Simeon Hall are my guests tonight. We're talking about this notion of legalizing medical marijuana. In the setup there, I talked about the demonization of marijuana. You know, I sit here and I think my late grandfather must be on a rotisserie in his grave spinning around at even the thought of this, because as gentlemen, as you would have said, for so long, the notion of marijuana use in this country has been tied to criminal activity and something dirty. How do we begin to even change that narrative? Because I find the millennials are certainly much more accepting of the use of it, whether it be recreational or medicinal. My generation, I think we're sort of on the fence. But how do we begin to change that discussion and that narrative?
I think by showing the impacts, the economic impacts. I feel as though with this coming to the Bahamas, this should be a huge boost for our private sector. Everywhere else in the world, this industry has been born and developed and harnessed in the private sector. So I believe this is an opportunity to encourage young Bahamians and for them to get excited behind something that we can actually lead in our country, you know, and be on the spear's tip of, you know. We have the opportunity to. It's a small window now, but we do have the opportunity to do that. Coming to the party late, yes, but our country offers a lot of benefits that would make these opportunities even more robust.
What about Fenton Nemo the other day, who expressed how this herb was helping him? What if we were to show persons who are the recipients of this and are doing far better?
Bishop, I hear that argument, and I think that is a very good one. But to me, the largest impediment or the largest hurdle will be the church. As you said, very interestingly, the church really should be the headlight, but in many instances is the tail light in moving towards change like this. How do you overcome? You heard the story. She comes to his job and says, you know, how dare you? I'm sure even this very show is offending a lot of people. And if the church, you know, puts on the brakes and throws up the opposition, we all know what happens in this country. We all follow blindly.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Has the church ever really opposed medicine, though? It never has. And so from our end...
The church opposed Sunday shopping.
Well, for your churches.
Well, I just say the church opposed Sunday shopping. You know,
but what I'm saying is this. What we find in our churches, by and large now, particularly those that are driven and cater to a lot of the millennials, is that they have a high level of intellectual functioning. Well, what do I mean by that? You have a lot of people in your churches that are college educated. Right. Okay? The other thing is the church represents a microcosm of society. You have a lot of people in the world also sick. And I think, one, not just showing the economic benefits, two, having real and open discussions. I tell this to people all the time. I've never smoked marijuana in my life. Right, never. I can have this conversation and say that and still say I support it. There are a lot of people out there who are highly functioning in society, who are critical movers and makers in society, who smoke marijuana.
I know.
Okay,
quite
and
a few
so
of them.
an open, frank discussion, I think, moves that. The fentanyl more discussion is a key aspect of that. But thirdly, for us, is this aspect of it being a medicine first.
Well, here's what the fear is, I think, too, is that the discussion is quickly going to denigrate into recreational use of marijuana. That, oh, you're going to legislate for people to be smoking any and everywhere. And we know traditionally that whenever we oppose something in this country, the first thing we do is throw in the fear factor.
Yes.
And that is therein is a key concern.
One of the things that the commission, two things came to the fore. I think there were some 14 recommendations, but two things stood out. One is we should guard, it should be regulated. However it is used medicinally, a doctor should prescribe it. Secondly, they were concerned with the social injustice. Why should a young man be up to Fox Hill on remand waiting to be sentenced for a little sniff or something? And then the rich can get away with it, and the poor, you see them doing the shuffle. So we need to rethink these things. I think the church, too many times, we accept things as they are. You know, the Bible says the word became flesh. We need to concretize these things in human action. Too often we accept some medicine that our brother gives out and sanctifies has the byproduct, hurts people. I had a medicine that I called to my doctor and told him that I'm reading this thing and it says it will bother your heart. He said, no, go ahead and take it. 2 days later, I was in the hospital and I had to pay something like $3,000 to $4,000 with my co-payment, you call it. Come on, man. We have to. I saw another one the other day that said it might induce suicidal thoughts. Why would I
see them
buy
on television
like
every
that?
day? It's good for this, but then
That's
there are 10 or 15 side effects.
Let's look at it. That's all I'm saying. Let's look at this phenomenon. Let's talk intelligently about it and then move forward.
You had a couple points there that I totally agree with. Where was the scrutiny, like marijuana or cannabis, as I prefer to call it, is being scrutinized here? Where was the scrutiny when the Oxycontins and the Vicodins, which are all traditionally heroin, that's heroin, where was the scrutiny? Where was the scrutiny when, because we have a lot of heroin addicts around this country now that have been paid for, right, around the world. This is an epidemic around the world, that have been encouraged, and their habits have been treated and have been almost definitely encouraged for sure, but almost glorified in a level, because the pharmacist didn't start prescribing when he knew that they shouldn't be on it that long, and the doctor didn't. And that's where the problem, that's why medical cannabis has taken off around the world, and especially in California, because of that mistrust that developed because of the pharmaceuticals and the doctors.
Well, you know, kids buy cold medicine added to Sprite, I think, and that's how they get out.
And this is where we have to make this discussion be driven on science. We know, for example, that the studies show us that people who are opioid dependents, when they use marijuana, come have a higher incidence of success.
I saw a documentary just last night on that.
So the thing we have to always put, and I put this to my folk all the time, to my members, to the people on my staff, they were scientists first. Let's go back to the science.
Yeah.
Okay, but a critical concern, and something you cannot ignore, is the recreational use of it. Yeah. And that is the fear. I mean, we can't turn a blind eye to some of the things that have occurred or that have been blamed on the use of recreational marijuana.
Can I cut off the Dr. Smith for a second
Sure,
and go back to
please.
the Baintown Marvin?
Sure.
Okay. People don't always do what they want to do. I've actually done studies in the science of addiction. It's wired into us. Our ancestors wanted to find ways to make the fire quicker and hotter back in the caves. It's just the nature of who we are. And I've watched, growing up in Baintown, growing up in Chippenham, where the fancy people in the fancy cars pull up at 2 o'clock in the morning when they studying, and they're in the drug house, they're in the coke house, okay? At the end of the day, in your beginning clip, you had a quote by Eric Fox. People can do what they want to do. So I'm not, the aspect of recreational use or open use is something society has to come together, make a consensus on, and deal with. The same way we did with alcohol, same way we did with cigarettes. There may be restrictions here or there, age-wise, whatever else.
Same thing we recently did with gambling.
With gambling, okay.
Also a deal.
Okay, and so as a scientist, my role is not to say you can't do this or you shouldn't do that. Everybody has to make their own mind up for themselves. The bishop will tell you we all go to the judgment one by one. Okay, but for me, we cannot allow the conversation for medicinal use to be dealt in with that. We have to deal with this as a separate issue, and if society wants to move toward open use, recreational use, whatever else, decriminalization, however they want to deal with it, then society needs to make that decision. But I don't think society gets to decide whether a medicine is good or not. Indeed. Science needs to speak to that, and society will then decide what they want to do with that.
Elliot, I will ask you I want to use sort of the California context for our viewers that don't know. How does it work in a state like that?
Well, a doctor will write a recommendation for a sick patient, and that patient will come to me, and I will treat that patient. When doctors are sick, they come to me, and I treat them. Doctors really don't know anything about this industry or how to treat, how to grow the product, how to determine efficacy of the product, what product is good, the extraction processes. That's where that all was developed and nurtured in the private sector. So when doctors have prostate cancer or brain cancer, they come and call me, and I treat them. That's how it goes on. You get a recommendation from a doctor to go and see a cannabis provider.
And when you look at a state, for instance, like a California, which by its very demographic is a very liberal, very liberal state. How does a state like that balance the medicinal use with the recreational use?
We ran headfirst into recreational. The biggest negative, or the biggest positive of recreation is less black people are being harassed by the police now. That's the biggest positive. We have less black men going to jail, being taken away from their families, less black men being harassed just in general, people of color just in general. So that's the biggest positive. We've been demonized. They said that we use this product because of, it encouraged us to do all types of negative things, all of the thoughts. Because if we put it into context, cannabis has only been illegal since 1935. It's been legal longer than it's been illegal. Indeed. So it's been demonized specifically. They even in the propaganda to demonize it, they chose not to use the word cannabis and decided to use marijuana because it made it sound more Latino. Well, it was more ethnic sounding, more Mexican sounding specifically, and it made it easier for them to demonize that product. That's why they prefer to call it marijuana rather than cannabis.
You spoke about your grandfather in his grave, but your grandfather and his father, as all of ours, they use bush, they use herbs. That was how they kept themselves.
He was a Long Island man, so I know, of course.
You see my point? So some of them things they were smoking,
drinking.
They
were from the earth.
We lived on the land.
A very interesting point that you brought up, though, the fact that in a California, less black men are being stopped by the police, etc. When you look in this society at the number of young men who have been jailed, are jailed, who continue to carry the burden of a criminal record for a joint. I think, and that is what the CARICOM Commission is speaking to as well, expunging the records of those young men and women in some instances. But how do we now even move that discussion ahead simultaneously?
Well, they're taking it even a step further than that now. Right now, in the majority of the cities in California, and a lot of states are adopting this now. If you're in a minority and you've lived there, you have first preference for licensing. If you lived in these areas that they've been really decimating it. So I live and my office is in a region that has been totally oppressed by the police. So much that they've now put the majority of the licenses are now centralized there, and they aren't issuing licenses to other people now. In order to get a license in majority of California right now, you have to par up with a minority. You have to group up with a minority to get that now. So from '96 to now, black people have been, and minorities have been decimated by the criminal justice system for cannabis. and left out of the cannabis industry. You know, when I came in, I could only get a job at the front door. That's the only place I could work. If it wasn't for my mind, I would have still been at the front door, because the people who I met at the front door, the people of color, are still there today. So that's the only place you get. Now you have opportunity for ownership. You know, that's the beauty of our options here. Like, I believe this will bring hundreds of new millionaires to the Bahamas that we've never seen, people that look like us. Hundreds of those. And all of those people don't have to grow the product. You know, we estimate some 25 sectors are going to be impacted or created in our business sector here, and 3 or 4 of them deal with product physically. Everyone else, peripheral industries, ancillary parts of the industry that are essential. And even if we were to say today, let's legalize and open the door today, we are, unless we completely sell out to foreigners, if we want to develop this industry within the Bahamas and make it a bustling industry for Bahamians, we're about 1.5 to 2 years out before we will be able to have our first retail sale, which still pushes us further down the road for the goal. But we have to train the population. On top of educating them to make it comfortable, we have to now train them to be able to make this industry go.
Gentlemen, we have to take a quick break. I know that you want to get in on the discussion, particularly on that end. Stay with us. We'll be back with more On the Record right after this. We are in our second season of On the Record, and we thank you, our viewing audience, for allowing us into your homes every Thursday at 8 p.m. We value your opinion, and we want you to be a part of our discussions. So make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram and comment on our exciting topics. Remember, it's all on the record.
Every time I'm in the Bahamas, I use Rev Go Play.
Cut.
Here come that fool. It's packing. Here he comes.
Yo.
Wait, Omar coming.
Boy, this Rev Go Play, solid.
Rev, you and us together.
And we are back with more On the Record. We are discussing the possibility of the legalization of medical marijuana in the Bahamas. My guests, Bishop Simeon Hall, Dr. Marvin Smith, and Elliot Hepburn Marshall. As we went into the break, we really began to explore what I think is probably the most exciting and intriguing part of this entire discussion. And that is, what could be the economic benefit to our people and to the economy? Dr. Smith, I want to start with you. From the pharmacist's point of view, what do you see really as some of the upfront benefits, even at this point, should government move ahead with the legalization of medical marijuana or cannabis?
Well, let's just look at some of the major diseases that we already have research that marijuana helps to treat. Cancers of all sorts of types. We have some of the highest rates of cancer. And this
would be a lot cheaper than some of the traditional methods, I would think.
Not just cheaper, it might be more effective.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you talk to anyone who's ever been through chemo.
And also, one of the biggest things that we've looked at is that patients who, even if they are on traditional medicines and they do take medicinal marijuana, they're able to cope more, which allows them to work through treatments, which again produces an economic stability for the patient. So we're looking at things from that end. We're looking at diseases like epilepsy, diseases like adjunct therapy for diabetes, autism, Tourette syndrome, ADD and ADHD, instead of putting these Concerta and Ritalin and these sort of things that we now see 20 years after they've been in the market that they lead to other issues. And so you're seeing a lot of the irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, GI disorders. So these are the things we have to look at.
I was watching something on Headline News early this morning. There was even a lady who had been, she had been a witness to an attempted murder. And it psychologically she couldn't cope with life anymore. And as soon as she started, she said she just became happier and she was back into the throes of life, as she almost described it. Bishop, from your perspective, where is the rest of the region on this? Is this a similar discussion fight in other countries around the Caribbean, or is it a different kind of discussion?
We went to 9 different island nations, and what I was fascinated by is the level of discussion that we had. I was intrigued to see persons from different ethnic, racial background, religious background, sitting in a room, 300-400 of them, and they're talking to one another rather than at each other. The idea of the economic benefit did come up. And I remember someone discussing that Europe took our corn, they took our cane, we must not let them take our marijuana. Well, marijuana grows in every island nation in the Caribbean. Now, either the birds dropped them or God had something in mind when he gave it to us.
We'll be growing it. We are growing it.
But you see, human beings have a way of corrupting things. We must be sure that it is not corrupted. That's why I'm a little reticent about recreational marijuana. But once the scientists tell us that it does have medicinal value, I think we should go down that line. Now, as long as money determines our decisions, then those who have vested interest will not bless what we're trying to do. And so that's where I am.
You spoke to the point, Elliot, about the fact that we needed to retain this and not sell out to foreign interests. Yes. What's the potential now for us, and what are some of the things we should not do or should rail against if we see starting to happen?
Well, I think, like what Bishop Hall was just implying, we have cannabis strains that grow throughout our country indigenously. They're ours. So we need to get the science behind those, and we as Bahamians, that should be ours. That shouldn't be given elsewhere. We shouldn't allow. I saw a TV show, Strain Hunters, and they have these guys that travel around the world, go in and basically take in everyone's indigenous land races. And they came here as well. They came through Jamaica. It's not a good. We have the opportunity to own our things. We have the opportunity to strengthen our pharmaceutical department, make our pharmaceutical department, make Marvin's job that much easier because he has more resources available. We have the opportunity to make the products coming out of the Bahamas the best in the region, and have it trickle down to many different aspects from shipping, pharmaceuticals, healthcare. We talk about the topical aspects of this plant. It almost bombards my mind. There's so many things that I've seen it done, and it's hard for me to get it all out of one statement because I have so much patience from so much wide ranges of ailments, and even things I didn't know it would affect, like lupus. Just a host of things that I didn't know, and it's frustrating that we can't get down this road faster. It really is, and I feel like that's why I'm fighting for Bahamians to own it, because we really don't want a new plantation. I think we walked out of that lifestyle.
Indeed.
We don't want that again.
In a physical sense,
in a physical sense, exactly.
Mentally, we are still very much enslaved in many ways.
Exactly, and so that's what I'm just advocating for us to own this, because I'm seeing now what's happening not only in my state but around the world.
Gentlemen, what should happen? What should the Prime Minister, Cabinet, government be considering, even after Prime Minister has said that there will be a commission which will assist in gathering the views and driving this discussion forward, which on the surface I do agree with. I think it is the right thing to do. There are some people who are opposed, and there are many, like you, Bishop, who need to understand what this could do and can do and is doing in other places. A lot of times we are responding out of ignorance, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. We just don't know. But what really should be happening, and what kinds of things should government and those in government and even in civil society be paying attention to and trying to advocate and move forward?
One of the things I hope doesn't happen is we get bogged down in the paralysis of analysis. We are known for that. We discuss and talk and you know, there's another way for me to say that from Farm Road, but we just talk, okay? People are hurting. And if this plant can bring deliverance to people, then we should explore it. I agree with my brother here. The scientific studies should be done, and that should be the basis of some conclusions. Also, as the brother said, he's already in it. Can we look at this? One of the things that fascinated me about this plant is not only is it used for leisure or for medicine, but you could take different strains of it now and make different materials. How is this possible? And what could be the financial benefit of this? All I'm saying is, let's explore it intelligently.
Are any Bahamians really on the scientific part or on the study part? Are we actively involved in trying to gather the information? Because, you know, as Bishop said, we could talk a lot.
Well, keep in mind, technically, it's an illegal substance here.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't do the research here.
We can't even research
unless
it here.
the government approves it. And this is what we've been calling for, both the local association here and the regional associations across the region. Allow us to be a part of putting the scientific information.
We can't even gather the information to
Jamaica
make a case.
Jamaica has, but I think in our break we talked about, as Elliot brought up some things, that Jamaica did it, but they did it in a way that some of it's been sold out to some foreign entities. We have a university here, a university that's also part of a network of other Caribbean universities.
Oh, good idea.
Okay, because you're dealing with a strain-specific plant, okay, there are opportunities to do the same research with different strains in different islands, and we would own the science. We would own the science. All right. Every time you go to take a drug, say for example, aspirin, and all of those things that have the side effects and everything else and the dosage, that came from a research, the single first research. Everybody who makes it has to pay that original company to be able to publish that information. We would be in a position where we would have
copyright.
Yes,
kind of
like patents. And we can patent the science, the information, and anybody that wants to market our product, sell our product anywhere would have to pay us for the information.
Yeah,
this is and see, patent on items can last sometimes only 7 years for drugs, sometimes 12, but patent on information, on IP, intellectual property, lasts a lot longer. So you're talking about residual, continuous revenue that our educational institutions can be a part of.
We roll with 12%. Gentlemen, we will pick up our discussion on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
We are into the final segment of this episode. As we went into the break, so you were talking really about beginning the research and what should happen, but during the break, as we sometimes do, we have these discussions, and you know, as the old saying go, you know, Rome burns while Nero fiddles. And Elliot, you brought up a very good point, even about the research and how we should be, we should not get bogged down in a lot of, and why should not that happen?
Because the research is out there. What we have the benefit here in the Bahamas of is we don't have an FDA and we don't have a federal government here overseeing. So research can be done more efficiently, a lot more expedited here. I feel that's the benefit that we have for research, but we also shouldn't give that benefit off easily. That should be harnessed and nurtured here with Bahamian businesses and Bahamian entities, I feel, to give them, that's the only advantage that we could possibly lead into, is that we could probably get further down in trials than the average big company right now because of regulations in the US or Canada. So I think that's a huge benefit for us. Partnerships. The industry is beyond strain-specific stuff. Like, I don't go off of, we don't use strains anymore specifically because we're into concentration stuff from the extraction.
Okay, so talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old now.
Okay, so we get as much different types of plants. I say it as basic as I can to protect my IP, as much as we can, and we want to use as much of those plants as we can in our process to get meds to you, because that will ensure each strain, like Marvin spoke of strains, each strain has a fingerprint, and each fingerprint is different for each plant, and sometimes within that strain family. So if you have two cuts that you got from the same mother plant, they can be genetically different. So each one is different, and those profiles that each one has, like if you look at all the compounds that would be in it, you have a list like this. Those compounds are what kill the cancer, go past the blood-brain barrier, enter the prostate, go through the transdermal layer of the skin. It's those compounds that are now essential.
You know, you just made a point that I think a lot of people don't even realize. They just think a marijuana plant. They just think one plant. And, you know, you talk thousands. I mean, and that in and of itself shows that there is a greater need for so much more education,
research,
and research, and just discussion.
And not just that, research with good product. I had the opportunity in pharmacy school, my lecturer that taught us pharmacognosy, which is the study of plant-based medicines, was actually a researcher at the University of Mississippi at the Federal Medical Marijuana Facility. He told me this in 1995, and I heard it again from Sue Swisher, Sizzler, a couple of weeks ago. The quality of the marijuana that the U.S. government gives them to research on is garbage.
That's why it's been a private sector industry.
And so the market is open for us here.
And knowing people who do indulge, people will always say the grade that they get in the Caribbean for recreational uses of a higher quality. I mean, I hear people say that all the time.
The Caribbean is of a high quality?
Yeah.
Definitely not.
No?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Not even almost close. Because of the prohibition of it. How can they produce a premium product with so much fears and prohibition when I can go into my warehouse and grow comfortably in the perfect and create perfect environments for my plants and pay my bills every month for my power and my water and not have any stress?
Because it's interesting in a controlled environment.
Would it does bespeak the fact of so much information? I'm learning just sitting here.
You're making notes. I hope the powers that be are watching as well, so that they are paying attention.
Get as much information. I agree with the brother. We shouldn't spend too much time. The University of the Bahamas might be the plank to gather the already produced medicine that's already out there. The science is out there. Can we
and you have it already.
We have it already.
FDA, European medication, those are already approved medications.
Approved medicine. So let's research it.
No need to reinvent the wheel.
Indeed.
Now, I do want to speak to one other issue that we sort of glazed over or glossed over a little earlier, that I think is of great concern to the community. And while we've been here discussing the medicinal properties of marijuana or cannabis, however you want to term it, there is, I think, that elephant in the room that we have not spoken to. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown issued an apology to the Rastafarian community of that country for years of persecution. Do we owe our Rastafarian community an apology for the stigma that we have placed upon them over the years because of their use and involvement, and for religious purposes?
I think we do. I think we do.
Yeah.
If we were to see people who are different from us first as the human beings that they are, the Rasta is a human being.
Bishop, some of the things that we say and how we behave.
All I'm saying, see the person as a human being first. He's a human being who happens to be a person's, the homosexual or the lesbian. He is first a human being who has a sexual preference different from mine. If I could see him as a human being, I could relate to him. Forget what his practice is and what his religion is. I think we do Rastas wrong because they are also first and foremost human beings. Now, are we willing to accept their dress? Are we willing to accept their clothing, those are secondary things.
We do it for the Hindus in our society.
And Muslims.
But
they color different.
But yeah, they got different color and they hear the texture is different. So.
It's a sense of, it's just a splash of self-hate. It's a splash of self-hate. I think we definitely owe them. Yeah, we definitely owe them an apology. We also owe our youth an apology.
Yeah.
This has been absurd what we've put our youth through. How dare we talk about, this D average when we could be giving all of our A average kids misdemeanors or these crimes on their police record that stopping them from leaving this country and seeking opportunity for themselves.
And in the Bahamas, the late Dr. Dentisenius said that a Bahamian is somebody who think that they have an inalienable right to go to Miami. If you got a criminal record for marijuana, you can't go to Miami. And that, for most people, is a cardinal sin. I'm saying let's help those brothers on the street and let them come back into society.
To a point, and we're going to take some closing thoughts right now, to a point, when you look at, and people have said, and studies have shown this, when you look at alcohol, which is legal, alcohol contributes to more crimes, deaths, illnesses,
and family destruction,
and all kinds of things.
It's 30% addiction rate.
Wow.
The highest rate we've seen in marijuana is 9.
Interesting statistics. I hope people will listen to that. Gentlemen, I've got a couple of closing questions here. Bishop, I'm going to begin with you, and I just want you to give me some brief closing thoughts as we wrap up. You mentioned it earlier, but really, do you think the church as a body, and I don't just mean as denominations, do you think the church as a body should come out and openly support the legalization of medical marijuana?
I think before we do that, there should be a consensus that we should study it, and we should find out as much information. I think information before legislation should take place. You can't expect the church in ignorance. Too many Bahamians, particularly sometimes conservative Christian faith, we have taken a residence in the shanty town of asininity and ignorance, and so we don't want to even discuss it.
I'm using that one.
We in the country we tear down the shanty town, so hopefully we'll take that same attitude towards the church. I like that. I think I'm going to borrow that as well. Doc, in a society, the society that we live in, we generally reserve anything to do with with the medical profession or medicine for a particular type of person. You got to be a so-called, in some instances, the doctors are at the higher echelon, and some healthcare providers. But do you see this now as an opportunity for more Bahamians to be involved in an industry that can reap or has the potential to reap huge economic benefits?
I think both professionally and personally. I think that if there's a Bishop had his 180, I've had mine. At the beginning of my sort of immersion into this, after it became an issue for my members, I could tell you I was not for this. I was not for this. And I certainly wasn't for people who weren't pharmacists or doctors to be involved in it. All right? And a good friend of mine pulled me aside and said, listen, let me talk to you about some stuff. And it was a Bahamian. And he said, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. If you had asked me 6 months ago, right, if there was validity in somebody who didn't have a doctor in front of their name to be involved in this, I'd have been the first one to tell you, I probably made those statements before. And it's been because I've had to go back to my roots and said, what is the science on this? And I realized that science is not just about degrees. It's also about active learning. And people like Elliot who are involved in this are active learners. And I'm learning from him.
Yeah.
He knows more about this than any physician I met in this country and any pharmacist, myself included. And so we have to come to a place where we start, and this is key, our government has to bring the people who have the knowledge about this to the table, regardless of what the degree says, regardless of what they look like, regardless of where they get from Baintown or Sans Souci.
Or regardless if they work for government.
Or regardless if they PLP or FNL.
Yeah, don't forget that. Yeah.
Okay, we have to bring the right people to this discussion, and people like an Eric Fox, people like Bishop, people like Elliot, can bring something to this national discussion that, yes, will evolve and involve science, but also has to involve people and practice.
Elliot, I'm going to really let you end the discussion, but you know, you are a Bahamian who has participated in the development of this industry in the United States. You are making a living from this. You are making a difference. You are saving lives. What do you want to see happen for your Bahamas? What do we need to do in the immediate future, really, to get on this bandwagon and get on this train that's obviously moving around the world?
Oh yeah, it's left the train left the shop a long time ago. We've been missed. As a people around the world, we've missed this opportunity. You know, it started, it flourished, and now we're kind of now paying attention to it to get
late
into
to the
it.
party.
We don't need division here. We have the same goals.
Amen.
You know, we all want the same thing. I came here to fight for Bahamians because I saw what it did to my life, and my ultimate selfish reason is I want to come home. I miss home. I want to come home and live and maintain the lifestyle that I've created.
Amen for you. I wish more. I wish we could get more Bahamians like you to do that.
Yeah, I want to come home, and ultimately this was a route that, however it ended up in my lap, it ended up for me to get here. I want to see Bishop Hall flourishing in this industry. I want to see you if you decide to flourish. Same as Marvin. I want to see.
My friends are very happy that you just said that.
I want to see. I want to see us take advantage of what we can here.
Yes.
You know, we have the opportunity, like Marvin mentioned, to own the property that we own our strains that are in the Bahamas. I don't care if it's me that owns it, but we should own that as a country or an individual. Once it's a
behemoth, we have so much space to do it. We have so many islands.
Need these. And if we are caught up in bickering at the lower levels and having feuds at the lower levels in the different groups, we are not embracing who's coming. Who's like the elephant in the room is corporate cannabis. They come here and they impose their will on us. We all lose. Yeah. I lose. Marvin loses. Bishop Hall, anyone that has any interest in endeavors moving forward,
as a country we lose. That's that's money that can stay here.
And it'll come in and it'll go. So this is a unified front. It should be a unified front. There's enough money in this industry for everybody. Literally, there's enough money. Much more than $5 million forecast. Much more.
I'm so sure. And after listening tonight, I think that everyone who has watched this show should at least take an opportunity to understand. And I think at the end of the day, that is our mission, to get people to understand, what it is that we are looking at as a nation. As I said at one point, this is a very pivotal time for us. And it is an opportunity. And so certainly I trust that we will, face into this properly and with an open mind, and at least be open to a discussion. Gentlemen, thank you.
Properly was a good choice of words.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to change your mind.
Yeah, that is true. Yes,
do your research.
Yeah,
go on and do your
and
research.
Instead of using your phone to send WhatsApp messages and talk people business, go on Google and search and read. Gentlemen, thank you very much for stopping by tonight. I certainly have enjoyed this discussion. I have learned a tremendous amount of information. My brother, thank you for carrying the Bahamian flag abroad, and I have to tell you, I'm exceedingly proud of what you are doing, because a lot of people, first of all, would be afraid to say what they are doing, but certainly to have the success that you have abroad and want to come back home, you know, you ought to be commended for that. And we hope that one day I'll be welcoming you here and setting up this business.
We all smiles.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. Special thanks to Bishop Simeon Hall, Dr. Marvin Smith, and Elliot Hepburn Marshall, my producer, technical staff, and of course you, our audience, for watching week after week. Be sure and join us for more On the Record next week, same time, same place. Until then, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time.